I'm 25, and I got married last weekend. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I had the dress, the love of my life, a guest list full of friends and family. Everything was perfect, or at least it should have been, until the man who vanished from my life 11 years ago walked into the ceremony like nothing had happened. My dad. I hadn't seen or heard from him since I was 14. He didn't call, didn't write, didn't even show up when my mom was in the hospital fighting for her life 2 years after he disappeared. For over a decade, I assumed he was either dead or didn't care. Turns out it was neither. He just left, started a new life, started a new family, and last Saturday he decided to show up. With them. I hadn't invited him. Hell, I didn't even know where he was. I gave up on him a long time ago. My mom walked me down the aisle because she was the one who raised me. She went through hell picking up the pieces he left behind. She worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on, and now this man shows up like we're some long-lost family in a Hallmark movie? He didn't come quietly either. I'll get to that. What I remember most about the day my dad left was how normal everything seemed that morning. He kissed me on the forehead, told me to have a good day at school, said he'd see me for dinner, and then he just didn't come back. No note, no fight, nothing. My mom was frantic. Cops were called. A missing persons report was filed. It took months before she stopped checking the driveway every night. Eventually, we found out he drained half the savings and left the country. No real explanation, just gone. I had to grow up fast. I stopped asking why, years ago. I figured if he didn't want to be part of my life, then I didn't want him in it either. So imagine my shock when, in the middle of my vows, someone whispers in the back of the venue, Is that her dad?" I thought I misheard it. Then I saw him, in a suit, with a woman I'd never met on his arm, and 2 teenage boys who looked just like me at that age. He was standing there like he belonged, like he hadn't missed my entire teenage life, my graduation, my first heartbreak, my mom's near-death scare, every single birthday for 11 straight years. My brain blanked. I couldn't focus on the vows, couldn't even remember what line I was on. I just stared at him. My hands started to shake. I think the only reason I didn't scream was because my husband took my hand and squeezed it, grounding me in that moment. I couldn't process it then, but now I can't sleep. I keep replaying every second, and you won't believe what he said to me after the ceremony. After the ceremony, I was still in a daze. People kept coming up to congratulate, hugging, clinking glasses, but my eyes kept drifting toward the man I hadn't seen since I was 14. Every time I looked, he was smiling like we were about to catch up over brunch. His new wife, or girlfriend, stood beside him, beaming like she was part of some big, beautiful reunion. She had the audacity to wave at me. I swear. Eventually, I couldn't hold it in. I pulled my husband aside and told him he needed a second, just one. He asked if I wanted security to escort my dad out. Yes, we had security because our venue required it, but something in me wanted answers, not closure, not healing, just truth. After all these years, he owed me that much, didn't he? So I walked up to him. He smiled wider, arms already opening like he was about to hug me. I didn't let him get close. I stopped him with one look and said as calmly as I could, "Why are you here?" He seemed genuinely confused, like I was the unreasonable one. He said he saw the wedding announcement online. A mutual family friend had posted it, apparently. Felt wrong not to be there. According to him, this was a big milestone, and he wanted to show support. He said he missed me every day, and that life just got complicated. I nearly laughed in his face. Complicated? What about when my mom was diagnosed with sepsis, and the doctor said she might not make it? What about when I spent a week sleeping in a hospital chair hoping she'd wake up? Or the year I almost dropped out of college because I couldn't afford rent and tuition and food all at once? Where the hell was he when life was complicated for me? I told him all that, quietly, through gritted teeth. He had the nerve to look hurt. Then he said something that really messed with my head. "You'll understand when you have your own kids." He gestured to the 2 teenage boys next to him, who stood there awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable. That's when I realized they had no idea who I was. My dad had brought his new family to my wedding, without even telling them who the bride was. One of them looked me dead in the eyes and asked, "Wait, are you our sister?" My stomach dropped. So he didn't just abandon me. He erased me, and now he was trying to paste me back in like I was some missing puzzle piece. The audacity, I still don't know how I kept from screaming, but it gets worse, so much worse, because just as I turned to walk away, he grabbed my arm, gently but firm, and said, "Your mom kept you from me. You don't know the full story." That's when I saw red. I didn't scream. I didn't make a scene, but something in me cracked the moment he tried to blame my mom, the woman who worked 2 jobs, skipped meals, pawned her jewelry, and still made it to every school concert and parent-teacher meeting, even when she looked like she hadn't slept in days. She kept him from me? No, he kept himself. I looked him dead in the eyes and told him if he was here to rewrite history, he could leave. I wasn't going to stand there in my wedding dress on the happiest day of my life and listen to him twist the truth. That's when he reached into his suit pocket and handed me a letter, an actual handwritten letter, folded neatly like he'd practiced giving it to me. He said he'd written it years ago, that he'd tried to send it but didn't know where we were, that he held on to it all this time, just in case. Just in case what? He disappeared. He didn't call, didn't email, didn't even try to see me. My number never changed. My social media was always public. He knew where my grandmother lived. Hell, he even showed up here, which meant he knew how to find me now. So don't tell me he couldn't have done it earlier. I took the letter, but I didn't read it. Not then. I stuffed it into my clutch and told him I didn't care what it said. Then I turned around and walked away. I was shaking, part from rage, part from adrenaline, part from just emotional whiplash, because I'd gotten married less than an hour ago, and now here I was, face to face with the man who made me spend most of my childhood wondering what was wrong with me. And this is where the story should have ended, right? But nope, not even close. Because after I walked away, I went back inside and tried to move on. I danced with my husband, took photos, smiled through gritted teeth, tried to focus on the people who actually showed up for me. Then my cousin ran up to me and whispered something I couldn't believe. My dad wasn't just at the wedding, he was giving an impromptu speech. When my cousin told me what was happening, I thought she was exaggerating. I mean, who does that? Who crashes their daughter's wedding after a decade of silence and then grabs the mic at the reception? But when I turned to look, there he was, standing in front of our guests, holding a glass of champagne in one hand and the mic in the other. The DJ looked confused but too polite to stop him, and my husband, bless him, had just stepped out with his best man to fix a last-minute issue with the dessert bar. So I was alone, watching this slow-motion train wreck unfold. He cleared his throat and said something like, "I know I wasn't on the program, but I just want to say a few words to my beautiful daughter." I froze. It was like I was floating outside my body, watching it all happen from the ceiling. People started murmuring. Some guests were whispering things like, "I didn't know her dad was here," and, "Wait, that's your dad?" Because yeah, he wasn't in a single photo. No chair reserved for him, no mention in the ceremony, because he wasn't supposed to be there, and yet, there he was, acting like he'd just stepped away from the bathroom and missed the vows by accident. He started talking about how proud he was of me, said I looked beautiful, told everyone how much he regretted missing some years, but he was grateful to be here now. He tried to joke about how kids grow up fast, and weddings make a man emotional, and everyone just listened, smiling, clapping politely, not knowing the full story. It felt like being gaslit in real time. I started walking toward him, ready to end it. I didn't even know what I was going to say, just that he needed to stop. But before I got there, he dropped a sentence that nearly sent me into a full panic attack. He said, "I just hope someday she can forgive me, and maybe be a part of my boys' lives too." That's when my aunt, my mom's sister, jumped up. She marched straight to the DJ booth, took the mic, and cut the sound. I swear she saved the whole day from turning into a viral nightmare. Guests started clapping awkwardly, thinking the speech was over on purpose. My dad looked stunned, then embarrassed. He tried to laugh it off, but no one was really paying attention anymore. The moment had passed. My aunt handed the mic to the maid of honor and walked straight over to me. She didn't say a word, just looked me in the eye, squeezed my hand and nodded like, "You don't have to deal with this alone." My dad, realizing his moment was gone, walked back to his table, but the damage had already been done. My mom hadn't even seen the speech. She was in the back room fixing her dress zipper. When I told her what happened later that night, she nearly burst into tears. And as for the letter he gave me, I read it, but not before finding something else, something way more disturbing, tucked into the envelope. I didn't touch the letter during the reception. I didn't even remember it was in my clutch until later that night, after the last guest had left and the adrenaline had finally worn off. I was in the hotel suite with my husband, still in my wedding dress, hair falling out of its pins, makeup half melted down my face, but I couldn't sleep, not after everything that happened. He was asleep already. He'd been amazing all day, but I could tell he was exhausted. So I quietly slipped into the bathroom, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the tub with the letter in my hands. I stared at it for a while. Part of me wanted to tear it up. Another part wanted to read it just so I could say, once and for all, that I gave him a chance. When I finally unfolded it, a small photograph fell out. It was old, faded around the edges, looked like it had been folded and unfolded 100 times. It was of me, probably around 10 years old, sitting on my dad's shoulders at a park. I didn't even remember that moment until I saw the background, the red swing set from our old neighborhood. He was smiling up at me, and I was laughing, clearly mid-scream. On the back, in shaky handwriting, were the words, "You were always my favorite adventure." I didn't cry. I just felt empty. Because if that picture meant so much, why did he leave it all behind? Then I read the letter. It started with cliches, regrets. Life didn't go how I planned. I was young and scared. I thought I was protecting you from my mistakes. Then it turned into something else. He said he left because of money, that he got in trouble with a bad investment, and that certain people were after him. He claimed he left to keep us safe, said he never meant for it to be permanent. But here's the thing. If he'd left because of danger, why did he start a new family just 2 years later? In the same state? He said he wanted to come back, but he was ashamed. And by the time he built a stable life again, he figured too much time had passed. That I'd hate him. That reaching out would only hurt me more. He kept repeating that he hoped someday I'd understand. That I'd forgive him. That maybe there was still a chance to be a family again. But the last line is what made me feel physically sick. He wrote, "I hope you'll let your little brothers be part of your life. They've always wanted a sister." That's when I realized this wasn't just a letter. It was a pitch. He wasn't just trying to explain. He was trying to sell me the idea of stepping into their family, to be a sister, to play along. And for a second, I wondered if that had always been the plan. Because earlier in the day, I'd overheard his wife saying something that didn't make sense at the time. But now it did. She'd said, "I can't believe we didn't tell her sooner." What didn't they tell me? What else was I missing? That sentence kept echoing in my head all night. I can't believe we didn't tell her sooner. It wasn't meant for me. I'd overheard it in passing. My dad's wife whispering it to him when they thought no one was listening, just before dinner was served. At the time, I assumed it was about the wedding. Maybe something about my dress, or the fact that he hadn't been invited. But now, with that letter sitting in my lap, and the photo still in my hand, the tone of her voice started to sound different. It wasn't casual. It was guilty. I barely slept that night. My husband kept asking if I wanted to talk, but I didn't know what to say. I was still trying to make sense of the gut feeling in my chest, like I'd opened a door I should have left shut. So the next morning, while everyone was still sleeping off the celebration, I went for a walk. I ended up at my cousin's house. She's the one who warned me during the wedding that my dad was making a speech. She's also always had the best radar for drama, and I knew if anyone had picked up on weird behavior, it'd be her. I didn't even knock. She saw me through the window and waved me in with a mug of coffee already in her hand. Before I could even say anything, she said, "Yeah, they were saying weird stuff." Apparently, while I was off taking sunset photos with the photographer, my dad's wife had been mingling, introducing herself, chatting with some of the older relatives who hadn't seen me in years. According to my cousin, she said more than once that she was so relieved the timing worked out. Everything was falling into place. When someone asked how long they'd been back in town, she said, "A few months. Long enough to know it was time." Time for what? That's when my cousin dropped the bomb. She said something about getting legal advice, about you having a right to know. Something. I felt my stomach twist. This wasn't about reconciliation. This wasn't about forgiveness or closure or even guilt. This was about something else. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my dad's mother, my estranged grandmother. We hadn't spoken since I was 16. She distanced herself from us after my dad disappeared, said she couldn't take sides. But I knew if anyone had answers, she would. She answered on the second ring. Sounded shocked but calm. I'd been waiting for the call. And after I asked her if she knew why my dad came back, there was a pause. Then she said the sentence that shattered everything I thought I knew about my life. "Your father never signed your birth certificate." It took me a second to even process what she said. "Your father never signed your birth certificate." I asked her to repeat it. She did, calmly, like this was just some forgotten detail she assumed I'd always known. I hadn't. She told me that when I was born, my parents were going through a rough patch. Apparently, my dad got cold feet at the hospital. He didn't want to be listed until things were stable. He promised my mom he'd go to the records office later and handle it. He never did. I don't know why my mom never told me. Maybe she wanted to protect me. Maybe she was ashamed. Or maybe it just didn't matter to her. She was already doing all the parenting on her own. But now, it mattered. A lot. Because my dad didn't come back out of love, or guilt, or some sentimental need to reconnect. He came back because of something legal. I asked my grandmother flat out, "Is this about money?" She hesitated, and that silence told me everything I needed to know. Then she admitted it. Apparently, one of his sons, my half-brother, was recently diagnosed with a serious medical condition, something chronic, something expensive, and their insurance hit a wall. Turns out there's a medical assistance program for minors that factors in family income and eligible guardians. And here's the kicker. If I was officially recognized as his daughter, they could file for certain benefits under extended dependent support, especially it appeared that he was trying to reunify with all his children. They'd started looking into it months ago. They didn't need me to pay for anything, but they needed to name me on forms, in applications, possibly in legal filings to prove intent to rebuild familial bonds. And in order to do that, they needed one thing, proof that I was his child. And since he never signed my birth certificate, he had two options: go through court or get me to agree voluntarily. That's why he showed up. That's why he gave a speech. That's why his wife kept saying things like, "I'm so glad this is happening now." It wasn't just a family reunion. It was a setup. They needed me to accept him back into my life, to post pictures, tag him in things, maybe even mention him in speeches. Something, anything, enough to prove we were reconnecting. And if I did that, they could use it. Suddenly, the letter made sense. The photo, the guilt, the dramatic toast, the pitch to be a sister. It was all part of the plan. I hung up the phone and just sat there in silence. My cousin watched me from the kitchen and didn't ask anything. I think she could see it on my face. Everything I thought was emotional was transactional. My father wasn't trying to heal old wounds. He was trying to use me. I felt physically sick. All those years wondering if I'd done something wrong, if I wasn't enough. All those teenage nights crying into my pillow, thinking my own dad didn't love me. I carried that pain for over a decade. And now I was finding out it wasn't even about me. Not really. It was about paperwork. I wasn't a daughter in his eyes. I was a technicality, a missing signature, a pawn on a form that might reduce his son's medical bills. And I started wondering, was he ever planning to tell me? If I hadn't overheard his wife at the reception, if I hadn't called my grandmother, would I have just blindly walked into it? That's what haunted me most. So I did something I hadn't planned to do. I called him. He answered on the second ring. Sounded hopeful, too hopeful, like he thought the wedding had opened the door or something. I asked him one question: why now? He paused, then gave me some watered-down story about timing and regret and family being everything. So I asked again, sharper this time, "Is this about your son's medical coverage?" And just like that, the air changed. There was silence, then a sigh, then this pathetic attempt to spin it like it was about us first. But yes, also it might help the family if I agreed to formally reestablish legal ties. I nearly dropped the phone. He didn't even deny it. I told him I read the letter, saw the photo, heard the speech, and none of it changed the fact that I'd been nothing to him for 11 years, until he needed something. Then I hung up. He called back 4 times in the next hour. I didn't answer. But then I got a text from his wife. It said, "We really thought you'd want to help your brothers. We didn't expect you to be so vindictive." That word, vindictive, lit something in me I didn't know I still had. Because they weren't just using me. They were trying to guilt me into cooperating, make me feel like I was the bad guy for not jumping at the chance to fix a life they built without me. They didn't want a daughter. They wanted a signature, and I was done playing nice. I didn't reply to her message. Not immediately. I sat on it for a full day. I let the word vindictive sit in my chest like a hot coal, burning through every last doubt I had about whether I was overreacting. I wasn't. This wasn't me being emotional or difficult or cold. This was me being done. So I crafted a response. One I knew she'd read out loud to him. One I made sure would sting. Not because I was trying to be cruel, but because I wanted to make sure I was never contacted again. I wrote, "Your husband walked away from my life for 11 years. He didn't call when I turned 16. He didn't show up when I graduated high school. He didn't send a card when my mom almost died. He missed my entire childhood. You don't get to spin that into my fault. If he wanted to be a father, he would have been one. He's not entitled to my name, my forgiveness, or my signature. I don't owe your sons a sister, and if you ever contact me again, I'll block every number you have and file for a no-contact order if I have to. You didn't lose a daughter. You never had one." Then I hit send, blocked her, blocked him, blocked every number associated with their family, and just to be safe, I sent the full message to my lawyer, because yes, I have one now. She's helping me make sure nothing can be filed under my name without my permission. No retroactive paternity, no sudden legal actions, no forged connections. I'm locking every door they tried to sneak through, and here's the part I didn't expect. I felt good. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight of his abandonment. I wasn't wondering if I was unlovable, or if I'd done something to deserve being forgotten. I knew the truth now. It had nothing to do with me. It had everything to do with them. My husband was the one who told me I looked lighter that evening. He could tell something had shifted. I smiled and told him the truth. I finally understood the difference between grief and release, because I'll always grieve what I lost when he left. But now, I've released the fantasy that he was ever going to come back and be someone different just when I thought that was the end of it. An envelope arrived in our mailbox, with no return address. Inside, a single page, not a letter, not a threat, but something I never expected to see. The envelope was thin, no return address, no name, just my married name printed in all caps. It wasn't typed, it was written in neat, controlled handwriting, his handwriting. My stomach dropped the moment I saw it. I knew it was from him. I didn't want to open it. Part of me wanted to rip it up without even reading. But the other part, the one that still needed to close the door my way, told me to open it. Inside was a single page, one sentence at the top. I thought you should know the truth before someone else tells. Underneath it, stapled to the paper, was a DNA test. His name, my name, the result. 0.000% probability of paternity. I read it 3 times. It didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. Then I saw the second document tucked in behind the test. A birth record request form, denied due to incomplete biological father information. There was a note scribbled in pen at the bottom. I left because I found out I wasn't your father. Your mom never told you. I couldn't breathe. I sat on the floor for a long time, just staring at the paper. The world tilted sideways. The memories, the heartbreak, the abandonment, it all started to blur into something else entirely. And for a split second I thought maybe he was the victim after all. But then it hit me. Even if it were true, it didn't excuse anything. He still walked away. He still vanished, without a word. He still let me grow up wondering what I did wrong. He still showed up 11 years later, pretending to want a daughter, when what he really wanted was my signature. He didn't come back to tell me the truth. He came back because he thought I was still legally useful. The DNA test? It wasn't honesty. It was leverage, because now he didn't need me on the birth certificate. He could take the paperwork to court and prove there was no legal obligation. He was covering his tracks, making sure I couldn't make claims if I ever tried to call him out publicly. This wasn't closure. It was a warning, and it made everything crystal clear. He was never my father. Not in name, not in biology, and definitely not in heart. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even call my mom. I folded the paper back into the envelope, sealed it shut with tape, and shoved it in the back of a locked drawer, where it belongs, out of sight, out of my life, because I'm not his daughter. I'm not anyone's pawn. I'm a woman who walked herself down the aisle, because I had to, because I learned early how to be my own protector. And now I know for sure, the man I spent years missing never even existed. Update. For anyone wondering, yes, I eventually spoke to my mom. Her face went pale when I told her about the test. Then she confessed through tears that it was true. She was young, scared. He'd cheated first. It was messy, and she thought he'd raise me anyway. But he didn't. So she did, and that's what matters. Because she stayed. And he never deserved the title in the first place. So no, I didn't lose a father. I just finally let go of a ghost.